Marvelous.
How are you?
It works. I'm good. Levels and everything all right?
Mate, you sound great. Sound lovely. How's things your end? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah. It's be working. How about that? Fucking
Nice,
magic.
man. It's good to meet you, Akira.
Mucho fucking gusto. Mucho pinche would be the right word. Pinche. Mucho pinche gusto.
Where are you right now?
I'm in studio. In Mexico.
Back home in Mexico.
I'm back in Mexico. Yeah. When did I go back? Friday. Just got recently. I recently got back.
How's it been? You been in the States?
Yes, I was in the States for the first time in a while. First time since we got locked out in early 21. Um,
Mate,
hasn't
I'd love
changed
to
too
talk about
much.
that as well in a bit too. It sounds like a bit of an ordeal that you had.
Life is suffering.
Yeah, life's a fantastic joke. That's what I think.
There you go.
Exactly, man. Are you cool to make a start? Is that good?
Yeah, I always assume things just starting straight away. You should always
Yeah, yeah.
start straight away. Something I
Mate,
learned early on.
to be honest, I'm
Often.
good with that. I'm good with
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Welcome to the last fantastic joke, Akira, mate. It's so good to speak to you. So good to meet you. Um, I've got to just try and be quite normal as we have this conversation because, as you know, from me pestering you on Instagram, you're consistently in my top Spotify artist. You are up there. It's and you know what do you normally get? It's like 5 top songs, isn't it? And I normally have My Dream with Gary V. It's normally Every Second Counts, mate. They're all up there.
Nice. Nice. Appreciate you. Well, it's kind of like it's like a hack because I do so many records and so many different types of records, and often with so many different vocalists. It's Meaningwave is more like a record label than an individual artist
Yeah,
or project, right? You know what I mean?
it's incredible.
So, in the same way that perhaps if you were a fan of, I don't know, whatever record label, if you were a fan of PC music, you might have, Hannah Diamond in there, and you might have like Danny Hurl in there, and you might have A.G. Cook in there, and that would seem perfectly normal. Therefore, so too it doth transcribe. Transcribe? That is not the right word.
Transpire.
Anyway, it does transpire exactly. There you go. Any more coffee? It doth transpire with the meaning wave enjoyer. They will find many of their slots occupied.
Mate, it's incredible. So I want to get into all of that. I suppose there's a place I want to start. So I was scouring. I know you colloquially. I know you from my own listening experience, and from friends, etc. But I was scouring in terms of having a look for research, and I, to be honest, Akira, I didn't dig deep because I want us to talk naturally. But I just found it amazing when I read the Wikipedia first line. I don't know if you ever indulge in I suppose it's self-indulgent, really, isn't it, to search your own name? But this is what they say about you. Akira the Don is a British musician, DJ, producer, and YouTuber. His music and production traverses the boundaries between pop, hip hop, indie, and dance. He lists influences including Ice Cube, Adamant, Morrissey, Big Bang, Leonard Cohen, David Bowie, and the Wu-Tang Clan. Mate, that is an epic description.
That's
And I
not bad.
think
Yeah,
it,
that's not bad.
it
It's
shows like
interesting. Of all the interviews and the things I've ever written where I've talked about stuff that I like, it's funny the things that get picked as
yeah,
like these
man.
are the five things we're going to mention as influences. All of those are true in their own way. Um, so yeah, that's
I
fine.
think it's epic. I think it shows like it's a real abstract and unique ways of what you do. But I think what I wanted to get into is like to the listener who doesn't know who Akira the Don is and hears all of those different influences, and like you say, I'm sure there's loads more that aren't listed on that little Wikipedia snippet that isn't a real true summary of an individual anyway. Why do you create? Where did this come from?
That's a funny question. Um, that's like what's the Norm Macdonald thing? Where'd you get your ideas from? Yo, um, I always did. So uh, everyone has a purpose. Everyone is here for some reason. Uh, you know what I mean? Sometimes people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that's what leads to problems in the world. Is when people are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. You know what I mean? I think of humanity as sort of like when I got a big ass monitor in front of me, right? And if I don't know how many pixels are in this monitor, it's a lot of fucking pixels. If one of these fuckers stops working, that basically fucks up the whole picture, right? There's going to be this one bit, uh, and I feel that way with people. You know what I mean? If like one person isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, then
Yeah,
that fucks it up. So, and we're in this unique position, certainly in the West, where there is more opportunity for people to do like that which makes their soul sing. Easier, as in like I would argue that it's always possible in some way, shape, or form. Some people have to go, back in the olden days, people would fucking go on, they would leave their homes and go on crazy voyages and risks, starving to death and burning to death in the desert or whatever the fuck it was. You know what I mean? Throughout human history, people have braved all manner of discomfort to follow that which calls to them. You know what I mean? Increasingly these days, it's this double-edged sword. If there's more opportunity than there ever was before for people to do that which calls to them, but at the same time, there is more luxury and comfort that people don't want to abandon. You know what I mean? Oh, well, I see all these people complaining about inflation right now because it means that their box of salad is like way more expensive than it was previously. It's like you could actually just make your own salad if you're that way inclined. You know what I
yeah,
mean? There are such
exactly.
you can buy an individual lettuce. It'll be a lot cheaper than just buying the stupid plastic box.
Or plant some seeds.
Exactly, right? You could even do that crazy shit. You could go way out there. But anyway, I do what I do because it's what I was called to do. And as long as I can remember, that's what it was. My earliest memories are like 7. Some people remember very early. I do not, but I remember like about 7. And about 7, I loved music and I loved like drawing and comic books and things like that. And I was creating things with those things that I loved. And I was making mixtapes with people. I was making comic books. I was writing about music in the back of the comic books. I was making songs, copying, using cassettes and recording things onto cassettes and copying loops to other bits of cassette and chopping up the tape and sticking it back together with sellotape and weird shit like that. So that's
That's
what I had
amazing.
available to me. So that's what I had available. We didn't have computers then. You know what I mean? When computers came along, I was fucking flabbergasted. There was a PC computer that I had access to, and you could record 6 seconds of a sample and combine those things in a little program. I can't remember what it was called. It was a tiny little box of a thing. And I remember recording a few seconds of a drum loop from a Beastie Boys record and a few seconds of guitar from Suede's We Are the Pigs and making a song with that. I must have been like 10 or 11 or something like that. And that shit blew my mind. No, I wouldn't. I'd have been 13 if it was Suede. Yeah, I'd have been 13 when I did that. So it was cassettes up until that point. Anyway,
So it's always been in there. Like, it's always
it's
had a
always been there, yeah.
drive to
And I've always
create.
been, and I've always been like doing what I could to make it so that that was possible for me to do. And early it wasn't. Early I was working in factories and stuff like that. And but I always like had it as what I was aiming at, and I was trying to work out plans as to how I could do it. At some point, I used to read a lot of music magazines, and I was like, well, if I went to London, because I was making these comics and fanzines and stuff on the side, and I was like, if I kind of back in those days there wasn't internet, and people tended to get record deals and stuff by like people hearing their demo tape, and you'd always hear about people sending demo tapes and just be
Yeah.
piles of them that no one listened to. I read a lot of music magazines. I knew it was all about people's contacts and shit like that. So I was like, well, if I went to London and if I like met some music journalists and then got in with some of those people, then maybe then that way I would be able to get my music heard by other people. Uh, so I did that. I went to London as a teenager and slept rough for a few months and kind of established and was going to gigs all the time. And I was doing my fanzine and I was using that to get like tickets for gigs and meeting people and stuff like that. And use that as a way to get into the music journalism world. And then use that as a way to start playing my own music. And it did end up working. It was basically I was always pushing towards this thing that I had as an aim, and I was always kind of reverse engineering ways for that to become true with what I had, like whatever limited means were at my disposal.
How did it feel to be on the extremes of that? Like that's really pushing yourself to your limit. one of the guys that features on one of your albums, David Goggins, that loads of people will know. I've just finished listening to his audiobook this weekend, and
Which one?
I'm a bit late to the party. Yeah, Can't Hurt Me.
Oh, right, yeah, the first one.
It's been out for ages, but I've been listening to that, and that really just reminds me of that. You saying you got sleeping rough in London, really trying to make ends meet, pursuing your passion at all costs. What emotions were going on back then when you're trying to break in, and I suppose probably feeling a bit like an outsider in that industry. You could see that you need to make these connections and not quite having those connections. How did that feel for
Yeah,
you?
well, you don't. You just, well, no, I mean, I don't think it matters. Like, for example, when you're sleeping under a bench in a park or in an abandoned building with no roof and it's raining and shit like that, you might feel discomfort physically. But if you have an aim, it doesn't matter because what you're doing is not, these things are non-negotiable, right? So you go, okay, this is my aim. And to get there, I need to do this. And if I do this, it will get me there. So I will do this. So it doesn't matter if it's uncomfortable. Um, it doesn't matter whatever the sort of physical hardship or the mental, whatever it is. And I was very aware. I was talking about this earlier with my wife because she woke up real early and then fell down a wormhole of looking at videos of what's happening in the Middle East and getting really upset and wondering if like we should be showing more of this to our son so he has more of a idea of how good his life is compared to some people's lives. People who are getting killed and shit.
Yeah,
Um, but I was like, when I was little, I was always very aware that there were people who had it worse than me. I read Charles Dickens. I read a lot of books and shit. I like saw what was going on in the news. There was always some people are always like, oh God, it just gets crazier every day, doesn't it? It's like it was always crazy. Like
yeah,
when I was a little kid, like the IRA were blowing up pubs just down the road from me and shit like that. You know what I mean? It was like people
yeah,
were blowing things up, people were dying. There was like everyone had fucking if you would look at it, if you listen to a radio or whatever, everyone had AIDS. There was a hole in the
yeah.
ozone layer. Everyone was going to
Crazy
fucking die.
stuff. Crazy
It's
stuff's always
always been
happening.
that way.
Yeah,
I always had this like contextual awareness that there were people who had it way worse than me, and I had an opportunity in that I had an opportunity as in I wanted to do something and I had, limbs. So I could go do it.
yeah,
So as
yeah.
long as I could just keep going, I always used to just say, just get on with it. Just get on with it. And you would get on with it.
It's really interesting reflection. You said that it's what you were supposed to be doing. It's what made your soul sing. So I suppose you really have just pushed through that and accelerated. So I suppose, can you just give some context for people that don't know? How would you describe Meaningwave? I don't think any of those little snippets on Wikipedia or anywhere else do justice to like the complexity or the uniqueness as well of the music that you make. You have carved literally a genre for yourself. Like you said, you've made like a record label with all these famous names that are coming through and that you're creating music from. So describe Meaningwave to me. How would you sell that to somebody?
Yeah, it's tricky because I always had this issue in that the music I was making was always diverse in the old sense of the word. And it's easier for people to sell you if they can say, it goes in this box. So this sounds like this. I never was able to do that, and it caused a lot of problems in my early career. I was like rapping, but I was sampling like Tom Waits and Leonard Cohen and indie records and all sorts of weird shit that is now more acceptable, but then wasn't. And I was always making music that didn't fit into certain categories. And eventually, when I came up with Meaningwave, which has no category whatsoever, it didn't exist previously. Like there is intonations of what it would become. Uh, so everything I've done has been kind of built on word of mouth and that kind of approach. I've never like had a press of in Meaningwave. I've never had, management or press or marketing or anything. And I was recently looking at a company who will like present your stuff to playlists and stuff. And they're like, okay, you have to put in 3 artists that you sound like so we can then pitch. And I was like, I don't fucking know.
Did you just
Like
go
it could be
Akira the
so many.
Don, Akira the Don, Akira the Don? Have you heard of Akira the Don?
It's ridiculous because it's in answer to your question for those that haven't heard anything. Part of what I'm doing is taking the wisdom of mankind and infusing it into music, which I consider to be the most powerful delivery mechanism known to man. This is something I worked out very early when I used to read my revision notes over ambient music and play it when I went to sleep, and that was the sum total of my education revision before I left school at 16. I knew that worked very early. And when I wanted to kind of brainwash myself and teach myself things in that kind of Neo in the Matrix, I know Kung Fu download thing. I found that if I put something in combination with music, it would go in a lot easier. And then I started discovering, there's in speech there is inherent melody and rhythm, and you can eke that out, and not in that kind of auto tune the news, just kind of force it thing. You can find what's already there, and if you find what's already there and eke that out and put the right music with it, then you can have really powerful experiences. If you go watch a movie with the sound off, it's not the movie. It's the music that makes you cry. It's the combination of the music with the movie that really affects you, right? And if you change the music, you can have a completely different effect. You can have exactly the same film and change the music. It becomes a comedy. It can become a farce or whatever it is. Music is like crazy powerful. I worked that out early. So with Meaningwave, I'm taking whether it's philosophers, people, interviews on podcasts, uh, old ass books like Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and turning these things into records so that we can imbue them. I have people, they write me letters. They say, oh, I've been listening to this one record of yours for 4 years, and I just worked out what it meant. And had they just listened to the speech, they would have listened to it once, maybe twice, not understood it, forgot about it, gone on with their life. But because they like the music, they just keep listening, and then one day it clicks and they understand and it
Yeah.
makes sense in the context of their life.
Or even, in some cases, read it, like you say, Marcus Aurelius.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might not have listened to anything like that, and they would read that black and white, and there's nothing there for them. And yeah,
Yeah,
it
exactly.
definitely imbues that meaning. Yeah, that's incredible. I love that. You said wisdom of mankind infused into music. That's it, isn't it? Meaningwave.
Exactly.
Incredible. How
And
do you
that's what myth is for, right? So the purpose of myth,
yeah,
uh, Star Wars, Pinocchio, whatever the fuck it is. The purpose of that is to condense the sum knowledge of the tribe into a form that can be shown to the child, and the child understands their place in the world. And the adult also, because when you watch the thing as a grown up, when you're watching Star Wars, the example was it Joseph Campbell who spoke about that? I think it was Joseph Campbell. It's like at a certain point in your life, you're going to identify with Luke, right? At one point, you're going to identify with little baby Anakin. Later in your life, you're watching it, you should be identifying with Obi-Wan. If you're not, then something has gone wrong in your life and you've not progressed. And like myth works as a mirror that shows you where you are in the context of society, what the society knows, all the information. That's why something like Pinocchio is so dense. It teaches you so much about lies and, sort of morality and all these various things, really super, super condensed in a way that a child can understand, that you would have to spend hundreds of years telling someone in another fashion. So that's what myth
yeah,
does. So then another part of what I was thinking was like, could we do that with music? Could we condense these ideas into this crystallized form of music that you could understand way more than you would just from, trying to read or trying to listen
yeah, and it's more
to
than
standard
just the
speech?
understanding too, isn't it? I think what you just said about like Pinocchio, for example, as a kid, like if you wanted to sit your kid down, I'm sure you'd say the same with your kid. If you were to sit down and go, right, I'm going to talk to you about morality, and I'm going to explain to you this, that, and the other, and I've learned all these things, he wouldn't be interested at all.
Shut up,
So
Dad.
it's imbuing it in in an interesting way. Oh, I'm going to watch this little film. I'm going to hear this story. It's more interesting in the same way. Like you can imbue that knowledge into the music that you create that people readily want to absorb because it sounds amazing, and they've also got that rhythmic speech that maybe it's clicking in a different way. For example, for me personally, your album Genesis with Jordan Peterson, the first one that you did, incredible. Like if I'm in a low mood, if I'm struggling mentally, if I honestly, as soon as I put that on, it just guides me through, and I take more from that than or sorry, rather, I take it differently than say I was to read it. I don't want to disregard Jordan's work, but in terms of the way that you can hear that and the way that you can build and crescendo and layer all these textures of the music alongside the wisdom that's being shared is just such an incredible thing. And I would just so encourage anyone that hasn't listened to it to just go and check out AKIRA the Don. Press shuffle and just press play. I mean, there's so much value to hear from all of those people layered in with some incredible music that you've created. It's amazing, man.
I
How
would
do you?
agree. I think you're right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. How do you select the subjects you work? I mean, clearly there's some interest and intrigue. Like I'm hearing what you're talking about in terms of these patterns and these archetypes. That take Jordan Peterson for example. I know that he talks about things like that, and so there must be some sort of interest that you have in these people. But I'm also assuming that there's some level of that it needs to be rhythmic and it needs to fit with. Does it fit with a creative idea you've already got? Like, do you take the speech and then do you work on the, how is that music going to sound in the background? Or I've got a piece. I think Jordan Peterson would fit really nicely with this. What's that creative process?
Yeah, all of that.
Cool. All
All
right.
of
Next
that
question.
is true. Yeah, all of that. Peterson said something once about when he was talking about reading the Bible and how he didn't understand it. And then he'd be just sort of reading and reading and reading, and then a passage would stick out to him. It was like it glittered. I think of it like, the way you play in a video game, like if you're supposed to pick a flower in like Red Dead or something, it's slightly shimmering. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it draws your attention to it. It's like, oh, this is the thing for me. And whether it's I'm reading a book or listening to a podcast or a movie or a speech or whatever it is, something will be glittering, something will appear to me, and I'll go and I'll rewind it. I'll go, or I'll hear it straight away. Anthem, which is about to come out, which is this thing based on chapter 11 of Ayn Rand's 1937 dystopian novella, Anthem. When I first heard, I was listening to the audiobook of that and just listening to it, enjoying it. Chapter 11 comes on, and I instantly hear the whole thing. I hear the music, I hear what the strings, I hear like the whole thing. I had like all over chills. I was on the beach.
Wow.
I had to run. I had to run back to the studio, like run, like 20 minutes or whatever it was, to get here and get it out before it dissipated.
Yeah.
So and in that instance, it was like I could hear it in my head. So then it was like getting it out, getting the chords out, getting the instruments out, type thing. Sometimes it's a case that I've already got a piece of music and it's like, this fits perfectly with that. I know it does. Sometimes it's a case that I want to make. Part of what I'm doing is kind of each idea builds on the previous idea, and I will be exploring certain kinds of ideas. If you look back at Meaningwave, like for example, the first Peterson mixtape and the first Watts mixtape are talking essentially about the same thing, but from completely different viewpoints. And if you go back, you'll see that I kind of work in phases, and there'll be a kind of subject, and I'll have a bunch of different people looking at that subject from their specific point of view. And from that, the idea with that is getting a kind of totality of perspective on the thing, which I think of as a kind of globe. And then all these different people are stood looking at it from different angles. And from their combined different angles, you can find what works for you.
Where does
So
that
there'll be
thing
that.
come from, though? That globe, is that something that you've been grappling with in your life, or is it something that you've just decided you want to focus your attention on and point those perspectives at?
I think it's like the orrery. You just have like visual language with things, right? Grant Morrison had a thing in one of his comics about like, I think it was the orrery of universes or something. And it was visualized as all these universes as kind of like glowing orbs in this kind of sort of church sort of structure, this like beautiful dome thing. And you could see them all in there. And I kind of think of things visually, I'll be thinking of it like that. And that there are basically essentially a number of these universes of meaning uh, that we all have to grapple with. There is certain core ideas and certain core fundamental uh, concepts that all of us have to deal with in our lives. And people have been writing about and thinking about forever for the history of humanity. Whatever ancient text you read, they'll all be talking about the same stuff. Everything that
Yeah,
like someone like Jocko Willink talks about, Marcus Aurelius talked about,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right? Like
it's
these
human
things, our
condition.
problem, yeah. As Paul Harvey said, our problems are not new, and we keep going around in these circles and we encounter a thing and we think, oh, this is the first time. Oh, wow. And, like if people haven't paid attention and read enough stuff or what have you, they will think that they're the first person to ever deal with a thing, and they'll think they've got to work it out themselves. But people thought about all this stuff before. Great, 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 great minds who weren't distracted by whatever the fuck, who had nothing to do but sit there and look up at the stars and really think hard about these fucking things. And you can go
Yeah,
back and read these people and listen to these people or listen to their songs in the context of Meaningwave, and that will help you. And you can
hundred
listen to a
percent.
whole bunch of them talking about the same thing. and amidst those perspectives, you'll find what works for you and your experience. Because we're all, navigating this realm of tears, and we all need some kind of operating system with which to navigate, right? And for a long time, we had shared operating systems, and whether it was Christianity or whatever it was, we all engaged with our reality via these operating systems. And in relatively recent times, we've got rid of a bunch of these operating systems, or we've kind of broken them, or started to hack them apart without understanding fully how they work. And then people are surprised with why they're finding it difficult to navigate the reality, the experience, right? Because they
Yeah,
haven't built a new operating system, they haven't tested the new ones that's coming in. A whole bunch of people are making a bunch of dodgy ones without fully knowing how to code and what have you, and people are getting themselves into a fucking mess.
that's a great analogy. That's a great analogy. I suppose that leads nicely to my next question, because the name of this podcast, Akira, is "Life's a Fantastic Joke." For me, that's a real personal motto, and that's something that what that means to me is that life has its highs and life has its lows. And you need to accept that sort of facetious, like unfortunate, the suffering, as you've put it. You need to accept that, but there's beauty in that. That's what makes it fantastic. For me, that's been like a reminder, a constant thing that I would say to myself in challenging times. And you touched on these operating systems that we have, and like these shared human struggles that we all go through. And part of the reason for doing this podcast is to speak to people like yourself who inspire me. So I really want to know, what, if any, has your struggle been with mental health, or those times of suffering? And what are your operating systems that allow you to cope with that, or allow you to pull yourself up out of that?
Yeah, well, we talked about this earlier, and like the one that you've landed on is a good one. That was pretty much Alan Watts's whole credo was kind of very similar to that, right? That it's playful. That existence is, it's not this big serious thing. It's kind of, it's a dance. It's
Yeah,
fun. I think he said it a number of times. It's kind of a joke. You can look at it in that way, and that's why we like comedians. Comedians can make us laugh about the most horrible things, you know. Uh, and then, as I was explaining to my son recently, when he was laughing about something that he was wondering if it was bad for him to laugh at it, I was like, anything is funny with a little bit of a perspective. Like anything at all becomes funny. Uh, Norm Macdonald and his 9/11 jokes, whatever it is, right? Anything can be funny with enough space, and it's that makes us able to deal with this veil of tears and this realm of sorrow, and the fact that life is suffering, the fact that there is so much catastrophe and horror and chaos and just carnage everywhere you look, depending on how you want to look at things. There's a song on the Joseph Campbell album where he talks about that idea. He says life is sorrowful, which is his translation from the Buddhist of the Zen. Um, Life is suffering, life is sorrowful, and the idea being that once the creature, in an evolutionary biological development sense, develops eyes and it opens its eyes, the first thing it sees is just this chaos and carnage of like life eating life, devouring life, everything killing everything else to eat everything else to keep on living and surviving, right? And the craziness of that. But then another way of looking at that is like the beauty. There's a beauty in that life comes from death, and that your greatest triumphs, the seeds for those were always to be found in your greatest adversity, right? In your greatest losses, your greatest tragedies, uh, the hardest things that happen to you in life. In those moments, that's where you find what you need for those great achievements later in life. It's impossible otherwise. You can't just get the great thing without the suffering. Dragons hoard gold because the thing you most need is always to be found where you least want to look.
yeah,
As Peterson noted, studying old ass stories and that whole thing we were talking about earlier, the power of
yeah,
myth.
100%.
Uh, as far as it's very helpful to have an aim. If you don't have an aim, you're aimless.
Yes,
Right? But so if you have an aim, what's the Nietzsche's thing? He who has a why can withstand any how,
there
right?
anyhow. Yeah,
So you want to get yourself one of those, and anyone can get one, whatever it is. It ain't got to be complicated. Children is a great one. My son, when I had my son, I was like, oh shit, I can't be fucking around anymore. I need to get serious.
Gotta
Like,
take
I need
this
to
seriously.
certain things, because it was like before that, it didn't matter if I died. I didn't care. I wasn't scared of dying at all. So I would put myself in really ridiculous situations and danger and ridiculousness. And it was okay because the only person who would suffer would be me directly. I mean, like God bless my mother, poor thing. But then you have a kid and you're like, shit, I really need to sort out my weird relationship with finance and get a whole bunch of things sorted out and like so on and so forth. So like that's the joy of responsibility. You pick up something and you carry it, right? And that gives you a purpose and that gives you a reason, and that's what you're doing. And then certain things just become non-negotiable because if you've decided I'm going to carry this big ass rock, well, you got to be strong enough to carry the rock, right? You got to be conditioned enough to be able to keep moving, carrying the rock. You got to be fit. You're mentally, you have to be strong because you have to ignore these various voices that come into your head and tell you, oh, you don't need to be carrying this rock. Just put the rock down. Da 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 da. So like adopting some form of responsibility or chosen purpose, whatever the fuck it is, and just doing it will help you build that tolerance, help you develop those neural pathways, help you develop the discipline and all these various things, which will allow you to do anything at all you want in life. But
Yeah.
if you don't quite know what it is that you want for whatever reason, I was in many ways very, very blessed to be aware very, very early what it was that I loved and
Very
what
early.
it was going to do very early,
Yeah.
as early as I can remember. Not everybody has that, but everybody does have that. They just haven't noticed it for whatever reason. There are ways of working out what that is. But even if you can't do that, just pick a thing and do it. Just pick a thing, whatever it is. I'm gonna, join a gym. I'm gonna get this level. I'm gonna be able to do 300-pound back squat, whatever the fuck it is. And no matter where you are, all these things are possible. Uh, I couldn't even do a squat 2 years ago. Fitness thing was the last thing I dialed in, and I literally the gym I'm in now. I walked into it and I couldn't do anything. I literally couldn't do a squat. They had to teach me how to do a squat, like giving me a plate and being just hold that and keep your back straight and all this. I was like halfway through the first class, I had to go outside in the road just fucking heaving. Uh,
Yeah.
and now I can do crazy shit that I didn't think even possible. Like I can do handstand push-ups and stuff. Just a
That's the
couple of years
value
later,
of setting that aim then too, isn't it?
just
Setting
setting
that
that aim
aim
and
and being
non-negotiable.
intentional.
And it was
Yeah.
non-negotiable. It was like it didn't matter how stupid I looked. It didn't matter how embarrassing or anything. Like didn't matter how pathetic or whatever I was going to be for how long it had to be. It was just non-negotiable. I'm dialing this thing in. I'm going to be the sort of person that can do the thing I need to be able to do. It is important to me to be able to carry my wife and son long distances across rough terrain in the in the chance of a zombie outbreak or something. And like, I can't just be fucking weak and unable to do this shit. What if there's zombies? You don't fucking
Exactly.
know. But yeah.
That's a serious way
So
to evaluate your life aims as well, isn't it?
yeah,
What
right.
if there's
And like,
zombies?
there's no going back to the mental health thing. As far as I can tell, there is no the sort of contemporary mental health things that people talk about. Pretty much all of it can be treated very, very well with exercise and purpose. I've never found that to not be the case. I've never come across someone who was depressed to the point of, couldn't get out of bed and this, that, and the other, who then adopted exercise and that did not alleviate a great deal of their suffering.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. I think that's
way more so than becoming slaves to the sort of corporate pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, I think that's a real challenge, isn't it, for some? I know plenty of people who've suffered with mental health that felt really uncomfortable with the idea of medicating, and then others who actually found that really beneficial. But in both
Mhm.
cases that I'm thinking of, both of those people also relied massively on their physical health and having that as an outlet and as a focus to support that sort of rehabilitation, I suppose.
Well, it's just one of these things. It's like, so if you have a purpose, like a specific purpose, and you're engaged in doing that on your day to day basis, you will spend most of your time in the moment, right? So you're if you just like build beautiful desks, right? And that's what you're really good and you make amazing desks and that's what you do. And like every moment you're crafting this desk, you're just in the fucking zone of that creation and you're in the moment. You're making the desk. You're not thinking about what happened with your mother 20 years ago. You're not worrying about what's going to happen with the rent in 3 weeks. You're just making the desk. And most unnecessary suffering, certainly of a like mental health type, is the result of people not being in the moment and existing either in an imaginary recreated past or an imaginary nightmare future situation. So anchoring yourself into the moment is one of the best things you can do for that, right? And work of that manner will do that. Like practical, whatever it is, work, making a song, making a desk, building a house, whatever it is you're doing, will put you in the moment. Similarly, exercise will do the same thing. If you're in the gym and you're actually really focusing on your deadlift, you're only in the moment of that. You're not in any of those places that bring you unnecessary suffering. So the whole
Yeah.
like exercise gym thing is just a shortcut to to getting you into the moment, to getting you into the zone and into the moment.
Yeah, because actually the inverse of that, when I've noticed in my experience being in the gym, and if some sort of intrusive thought comes in, I think, oh, I remember when I said that horrible thing in the past, or oh no, I'm worried about this thing in the future. And then I can't lift anymore, and
Yeah.
I'm back to square one, and I'm no longer in that present moment. And I think it's really interesting what you said about whatever anyone's views are maybe on the medication side of things, but certainly to avoid that concern and dread for the future, set that goal, set that aim, and be intentional working towards it. And then to address the issues of the past, something without taking medication. Therapy is a massively overlooked thing that actually, if people were to do that and break the cycle, you're then almost closing down that gap and focusing yourself more and more, allowing yourself to be able to focus on that present moment.
Whatever you can do to get yourself into the moment that you are, which is the only thing that is true and real,
Yeah,
and to be the best version of you that can exist in potentiality in that moment. Right?
100%.
Strongest, fittest, most capable, the ultimate version of you that exists within potential. If you make that your work, that's the thing that anyone can do. You can go, okay, I'm just going to make me into the best me possible. Lots of people will write to me. Uh, and they're really sad. Their wife left them. They're getting divorced. They've lost their girlfriend, whatever it is. They've built this life. It's gone. They don't know what to do. Like they just can't get out of bed. They're just awash with sorrow all times. And I always say that what you need to do is focus on turning you into the ultimate version of you right now. That's what you can do. And being that ultimate version of you will bring you everything you want in life. It will attract everything. And it works for a little kid and it works for a 50-year-old guy. Right? If you're like a 13-year-old boy and like you want a girlfriend and you want this, that, and the other, like don't go chasing girls. You turn yourself into the ultimate epic version of you, and all those girls will come to you. They'll come flocking to you. They'll be chasing you, right? And it's such a simple, silly thing. If you're a musician, don't be chasing magazines or whatever it is. Just make the best music possible, and eventually they'll come to you.
100%.
Whatever it is you're doing, if you're making a podcast, just keep making the very best podcast possible, and eventually people that will be recognized. The consistency and the quality will be, and people will come to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. But the idea of that best self, I always think of I think it's one of yours with Joe Rogan, isn't it? Be the hero. You have to be the hero
Hmm.
of your
Yeah,
movie.
exactly.
It's exactly that. Be the underdog, pick yourself back up, and focus on that best version of
No
yourself.
one's going to come
And
to save you, and nobody owes you shit. There are a few things you have to realize in life, right? You aren't owed nothing, right? So, oh, poor me. Why do they get that? Why don't I get? You don't deserve anything. Default. You are owed nothing, right? You create the life that you think you deserve, and most people don't think they. Not most people. A lot of people do not think they deserve things, so therefore they don't create that for themselves. So it's partly this like a self-esteem issue, uh,
yeah, but I think
and
you've
it
got
becomes this
the
vicious
opposite
cycle.
too. And there's also those who think they do deserve things who,
Oh, yeah, but
just
there's
feel
yeah.
entitled,
Yes, exactly.
which,
So you
which
have
is a
both of
challenge.
those extremes of ridiculousness. Nobody owes you shit, right? You
Yeah.
don't deserve anything until you make yourself into something that does. You just have to understand no one is coming to save you. Only you can save you. And
It's
then some people will take the religious version of that. They'll go, Christ. You go, okay,
yeah.
but Christ works through you, right? And if you read Christian doctrine carefully, like there is a great deal of self responsibility in there. It's not just
Absolutely right.
externalized, they will do everything for you. It's that Christ works through you, and everything is possible through Christ, and then Christ is within you. Right? So you still got to do the work. You can't just sit there expecting shit to happen and oh, why me? So you become the hero of your own story. You become the person. And there's always going to be something you can do, something simple to make yourself better and get yourself closer to that Christ version of yourself, if you're going to think of it in those terms. There are lots of different terms for thinking about it. There's always
I
some
was
little
going
thing
to
you can do.
exhaust. I was going to ask you exactly that because I would call myself a Christian, right? But I'm really still exploring my faith, and when you said that, I thought that is a real Christian idea of this version of yourself becoming like Christ, being the theoretically the best human who ever existed. That's that same kind of equivalent, isn't it? And you talked about it's basically you're born with nothing, you die with nothing, and it's what you do in the middle. It's that all points towards self-responsibility in a musical
It's
term.
both though, but also you're born with everything and you leave with everything.
Yeah,
And it's
that's
how you want to
true.
look at it, right? It's how you want
Yeah,
to think about it.
exactly.
Like everything, it's always this case of people, what you're looking for. People go on these big quests and they go all over the world and all this, only to find that what they were looking for was within them all along, and they had access
Yes.
to it from the very beginning. And they knew it when they were really little. They instinctually knew it when they were very small, and it got smashed out of them, and they had to
Yeah.
relearn things that they just instinctively knew as tiny little children. And that's one of the great tragedies and wonders of life and the whole adventure.
I was just thinking as well of the Pink Floyd, isn't it? All you touch and all you see is all your life will ever be. And I think for me, that just puts all of that entirely into perspective, isn't it? It's like it's whatever imprint you have on the world and everything that you experience. That's all you will ever be. And it's equivalent to that, like you say. Maybe you're born with everything and you die with everything, or you're born with nothing and you die with nothing. But it's what you're doing in the middle to be
Well, you
that
get to
best version of
choose,
yourself.
and you get to choose. Part of the problem with the abandonment of the Christian operating system across the West, and this is, Nietzsche warned that the death of God would lead to nihilism and chaos and all manner of murder as other things stepped into the void, right? So now it's up to you to decide what has meaning and what doesn't. You get to decide if everything is meaningless or meaningful, and it's purely
Absolutely.
a perspective choice that you get to decide, just like you get to decide if you're happy today or not. You can literally get to decide in any given moment whether you're going to be positive about something or negative about something, whether you're going to see the world from an abundance or a lack perspective. And that's the world you will get that will come back to you. If you step out in there and operate from a lack mentality, then lack is what you will get. If you step out looking at the idea that anything is possible and it's a world of unlimited resources and I can do anything I wanted, then that's the life you'll get. You have to constantly remind yourself of that. And I have a heuristic. If I'm having to make decisions, I will run it through an abundance or lack heuristic and check if I'm operating from the decision I was thinking of doing is coming from a lack mindset, like we don't have enough of this or maybe da da da. So then I'll go with the abundance one, even if that one seems silly or dangerous, and it always leads to the best outcome. But you
That's
get to
amazing.
decide. The point is, you get to choose.
Yeah,
It is a
I
choose
think you
your own
do.
adventure, and you do get to fully choose all of it.
Do you know what? I just reflected on that, and this is a bit of a self plug, to be fair. But the life's a fantastic joke, right? When I think of that, when I say that to people, because this is a small brand that I'm trying to build, AKIRA, right? When I say those words to people, some people say they hear life's a fantastic joke and they go, "Oh wow, amazing, I love that." Other people go, "Oh, that's a bit depressing," and I think that's maybe that dichotomy of, "Oh, I see things. Oh, I'm focused on the joke. Oh, you're saying life's a joke. No, no, no. I'm saying life's fantastic. I think it's
Fantastic
amazing."
joke.
So
Fantastic
what do you
joke.
think when you hear that? Do you hear the fantastic or do you hear the joke?
But I hear both of them, and
Yeah,
I like jokes. I think jokes are fantastic. So I don't see it as being a negative. I see how you could, and
yeah,
how someone who was like, but I wanted to take this seriously and da da da, and surely it's got to. You could interpret that from a nihilistic perspective and say, oh, so you're saying that everything means nothing. So you're saying it's
yeah.
all meaningless and it's just a fucking joke. Is that what you're saying? How could you say that about my life? This is my life. This is all I have. How could you? You could see how, from someone's specific perspective, they could interpret it in that fashion. You could
Yeah,
also interpret it from the Jocko good perspective. So
yeah.
you go, okay, it's a fantastic joke. So I'm
Everything's
just gonna,
good. Yeah,
boom, I'm going to operate from that perspective. So yeah, it's purely, as I was saying earlier, this is operating systems that we create with which to navigate this veil of tears. And if you happen upon one that works for you, If it feels like it works, then great. The important thing is it works, right? So
Yeah.
you could, I remember South Park laughing at the Mormons, and they're silly Mormons with their story of a guy with a plate and this, that, and the other. But like, if the Mormons have a happy life and their communities work well together, and their existences are optimal, it doesn't matter that the
And they're not hurting
operating
anyone.
system is based on a silly story. If it fucking works, everything's a silly story when you drill down to the bottom of it. If you trace anything far back enough,
100%.
that will be the case. The important
Totally.
thing is, does it work for you, and are you able to operate optimally with this framework, whatever the fuck it is? And if so, you found one that works, then great.
So, what's your framework like right now? We talked about life. We talked about making sure that you're doing what you're doing and what makes your soul sing. How did you end up from a lad, as I understand, from London? A British AKIRA the Don and proud, right? And you transferred yourself off to the Americas. You started this new life afresh. And as I understand, that come unstuck slightly through COVID and some complications there, and you find yourself now in Mexico, seemingly having a great life, Akira. Like you said, getting on top of your fitness, enjoying the sunshine, coming up with ideas for creation on the beach. But how did you end up there, and what does life look like day to day?
How to end up in the Americas? How to end up in Mexico? Like,
All of
I
it.
left. Well, the UK. I've been going to the USA since 2004. I think 2004 was the first time I went to the USA. Uh, at that point, I was fully aware of the sort of British tall poppy syndrome thing, and the thing that exists within Britain. There's this class culture. There's this idea that you're not supposed to step outside of your meager beginnings, and da da da. Like, what was it? George Best said, the only escape for the working class in the UK is football and pop music. And I was doing music, but even in that context, it's like the sort of music I was doing. It's like you're not supposed to be doing that, so it was tricky. But I'd observed that the Strokes, who were from the USA, had come over to the UK and kind of blown up when they weren't known in the USA, because people in the UK were like, "Oh, these guys are cool Americans," and I was like, "I bet if I could maybe do the same thing backwards. If I went the
Yeah,
USA, I'd be a cool, interesting British guy, and I wouldn't
yeah,
have that. You'll never become a guru in your hometown. That thing, you know what I mean? Uh, so I rang up my bank and flirted with a lady and convinced them to give me a loan of like $1,000 or something to get plane tickets. Well, I can't remember what it was, but yeah, because I had terrible credit. There's no reason they should give me a loan, but I found a really nice lady from Birmingham, and I'd grown up in the Midlands. Well, I started in the Midlands and grew up in Wales, but anyway, and so I was able to utilize the power of having things in common and knowing similar things to just chat with this lady. And then she lent me a bit of money. Well, the bank did. And I got a ticket to Miami and went to the USA. And, within a few weeks of being in there, I had Interscope Records was trying to sign me amongst various other people. So
amazing.
it totally worked. Um, anyway, and then I was toing and froing from the US to the UK, and lots of things happened over the years. And then around 10 years ago in 2013, I was out in the USA I'd been doing, what was I doing? I was doing the music for Grant Morrison's a convention in honor of the work of Grant Morrison. And he'd got me and Gerard Way from My Chemical Romance to come out and do the music. And then I popped in to see a mate of mine in LA on the way back. And I had such a wonderful time. I was doing some DJing, and I noticed that people would just pull up their cars and they'd wind down the window and go, "Hey, you look really cool. Want to come to a party?" Whereas in the UK, people would pull up their cars and wind down the window and shout, "Oi, faggot!" and like throw something. You know what I mean? And I've been reading this Charles Bukowski book, collection of short stories, and in one of them, he had a fucking fucked up night out, and he got like molested at an orgy or something, and he goes back to his house and collapses. He goes to sleep. He wakes up. He takes a shit. He goes back to bed, closes the curtains, and goes, "Life is as kind as you let it be." And I thought about that quite a lot. And I thought, yeah, you're right. Life is as kind as you let it be. That's basically self-responsibility, right? That's
Yeah,
extreme accountability. What's Jocko's thing? Extreme ownership. It's like,
extreme ownership. What you make it, isn't it?
I
It's
don't
life's what you
have to
make it.
be in this place just because I was born here or whatever. I could just go to that place where things are quite nice. So I decided that that's what we would do, and applied for a visa and went through all the stuff to do that, which took a long 6 months and cost a lot. Then we moved to the USA, and made a life there. Me and my wife and my son, who was an infant at the time, and it was wonderful. And we made our dreams come true. And I became a superstar celebrity DJ, and invented Meaningwave, and it was great. And then Tom Hanks' disease came along, and the old man plans, God laughs thing, right? We had all these plans for 2020, 21, 2020. We were going to do festivals and tour. In 21, we were going to be in Japan and do a bunch of stuff. But as it was, what happened was Tom Hanks' disease, and I got a new visa. And when you get your new visa, the Alien of Extraordinary Ability one, you have to leave the country, go to an embassy, get it stamped, come back in. So, and we were told there was, because of the COVID stuff, things were taking ages. And when we got the visa approved, our lawyer was like, right, you have to go right now. Just pack a bag, go right now, go to the nearest embassy, get that done, then come back. So we were like, okay, pack a bag, a couple of bags. I packed my laptop and like this little keyboard and a couple things, and went to Cancun in Mexico, which was quite relatively close, like 3 hours on the plane or something. And I'd always wanted to go Cancun because I love True Romance, and that's where they go at the end of True Romance. And anyway, when we got here, because of Tom Hanks' disease, the queues for the embassy were longer than usual. So it looks like it was going to take a couple months. And then after a couple months, the Biden administration decided that you weren't allowed to re-enter the USA if you weren't vaccinated. So we couldn't get back in. And that was that. We were stuck out. So I had my home and studio and business and everything in the USA, all my equipment, clothes, everything, life, work, all the stuff was in another country, couldn't go to that country. And so did the Jocko good thing, said, well, here's very beautiful. And we're meeting these lovely people here, and they're nice. And we've got this little Airbnb we're in, and they've let me take a room in one of the Airbnbs and turn it into a studio, and which was just a bare room and is now built from nothing into this little studio. We did that. We rebuilt everything from scratch in a country where we don't speak the language. I've been learning Spanish. We've all been learning Spanish, and that's been the last couple of years. So complete man plans, God laughs type of a situation. But what it did, it did lots of things in the, Jocko good sense. But like I was saying earlier, that whole fitness thing, which was the last thing, not the last, it was one of the things I really needed to dial in that I had not yet dialed in. And I was able to do that here and found the perfect place to do that. The gym I wandered into accidentally just so happened to be run by the Mexican CrossFit champion from 2016 to 2020 or something like that. The country's number one guy, who's now a friend of mine, is a lovely guy, big Meaningwave enjoyer. Like just randomly happened to wander into that gym of all the gyms. You know what I mean? So I'm surrounded by very high level, brilliant people on that level, which was the thing I needed. It was the thing that was lacking. So that's been wonderful.
That's amazing. That just sounds like the real, like we said, life's what you make it, and that Jocko good thing. That's exactly what you've done. I know you said man plans, God laughs, but also you've had provision. Like that's amazing. That's your abundance mentality. I'm conscious of time, Akira. Have you got a hard cut off on the hour? What we're saying?
What time is it? Oh yeah. Yeah, well, we can go over a little bit, but yeah, I've got to finish a load of records.
Oh,
I'm finishing the Meditations Volume 2 right now.
This is what I want to hear. So I was, when we'd originally scheduled this, I ended up listening to or re-listening to you on Jordan Peterson's podcast, which is just amazing. And just interestingly, in terms of like, I want to ask you about, there's two things really. I want to talk to you about meeting your idols and the way that you've ascended through this medium you've created. You have also created a lot of traction with those people whose voices you are using, which is incredible, particularly in that they are people that you're already interested in and presumably a fan of. so there's that element of like how meeting your idols and what that's like and that ascension, but then also the idea that you were talking about at that time, which I think was pre-COVID, which was nuts to listen to, because that's again when you were massively building, and like you said, you had loads of plans to go touring the following year. You were talking a lot about hyper productivity, so I've just asked you
Mhm.
then, have you got a hard cut off? And you're like, yeah, I've got to keep making all these albums. So my question was going to be, are you still on that hyper productivity? So we go both ways there. I don't know which one you want to attack first, because
Yeah, well, that's
presumably
what
there's some.
one of the things. So this goes into what we were talking about. I got locked out of the country that I lived in, and lost my studio and everything. But I
Yeah,
still kept releasing. If you look, I still kept releasing music at the same frequency. I was still putting out records every week. I was still putting out tracks every week. I put out, I don't know how many albums that year, maybe 8 albums that year or something, 10, I don't know. And just kept that going. I never stopped that, no matter what was going on. Before we found this place, we were in a sequence of various Airbnbs or like, unideal situations. And I made that Scott Adams record in a, just in a living room of a dodgy Airbnb, like no speakers or anything, just on headphones and a laptop. I made the Theo Von album in the same way. Like, I've been in that hyper productivity, get in the zone, refuse to leave thing since February 2018, and I haven't stepped out for a second, no matter what happened, right? And this goes back into what we were talking about earlier. It's like if you have an aim and you have non-negotiables and you stick to them, and no matter what, right? No matter what, then shit will be groovy. There's People talk about a lot in sort of, wellness or like self-improvement spaces about routines and how important they are, right? And it's like
yeah,
the
yeah,
morning routine and yeah, that shit is all great and works, but you need to be able to operate if all of that goes. If you can't get your coffee or get your whatever your morning routine thing is, right? If that's suddenly you don't have that anymore, you still need to be able to operate at the same
yeah,
level regardless. And that was that was something I kind of knew theoretically, but this really put that into uh, practice that really tested it on a high level. Can I still
yeah,
keep operating on that hyper productivity thing, still keep making that level of music, that amount of music at that level, at that quality, when you've lost everything?
yeah.
Almost. I had a laptop. I didn't lose everything, right? I had my arms. I had my health.
But
I
would
had a
you
laptop.
say that in itself is a bit of a routine in terms of like habitual thing that you're doing? Do you think in a way that that's that? Because I talk to people at work about this, like you've exactly just described. When shit hits the fan, how do we make sure that we keep doing what we need to do? And that's essentially what you described there, isn't it? Your life
So
was
it's the
as
doing of the thing, right? So it's
yeah,
you turn the idea is you have an aim, you reverse engineer how you'd get to that aim. You implement systems that will carry you to that aim, and executing those systems with discipline, you turn that into habit, and then your habits will carry you to your aim. And you analyze your habits, you audit your habits on a regular basis to make sure they're still working for you and all working to carry you to that aim, right?
yeah,
So the way habits work is they have triggers. So your environment will be the thing that triggers you to do all the things in your habit execution list. So if your environment is disrupted, you will lose all your triggers. Right. So then you have to go back to sheer discipline to keep going and then implement new habits based on new triggers. And what sometimes people will do is when they have their um, location or what have you, or immediate surroundings, and all those triggers disrupted, they will then kind of collapse and sort of fall back into old ways or old systems or what have you, rather than pushing through with new discipline. It's
yeah.
also a case that shifting one's immediate environment is a great way of implementing new habits if you have a bunch of ones you don't like, right? So it's like, how can I fix these bad habits? One way of doing that is changing your immediate environment and using that as a way to implement a whole new host of triggers that trigger useful habits rather than the unuseful habits.
Did you find that with the move to Mexico then and creating this new space? How was that for you?
Well, multiple spaces. It was multiple spaces for a while. So it's like, all right, today you're just going to work in that coffee shop because that's what you got. Or today you're going to work on a train, or today you're going to work wherever the fuck it is, right? So it took a long time before I was in a situation where I could like put in new, solid, definite triggers. So I really did have to go on pure sort of discipline and will for a long time, which is good because that just makes that stuff stronger.
Makes it easier,
The
yeah.
more you do that, the more powerful those things become, and then the more you can use them for other things in your life. And so that's all good.
That's brilliant, man. And I just want to ask you that piece at the end too. So, well, there's a couple of bits there, but in terms of that hyper productivity, you're still in full swing, in full with that flow state. I suppose speaking of flow, our mutual friend Tim Sheaf, he's
Hey,
coming on the podcast very soon. I'm going to tie him down.
give him my love. I'm very proud of him.
Yeah,
His journey.
yeah,
I've
he's
been
awesome, man.
observing him
And then I
for
suppose,
decades.
say again.
I've been aware of him and watching his journey and having occasional little interactions with him for decades now. And I'm
Yeah,
very proud
man.
of him.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Gone through a
And I
great.
suppose it's that just understanding that these amazing people are all humans in their own lives, living normally, if from their own perspective, through their own eyes, that's just their normal life. So coming back to that question of meeting your idols, you've spent time with Jordan Peterson on podcasts, and I'm sure multiple people that I'm not aware of as well, Akira, that you've met through your work. What's that been like for you, meeting these people that do inspire you, that you do draw inspiration from and creativity from? How are you confronted with that, and what sort of level of humility are you able to maintain when you interact with those?
One thing I remember at one point, my wife kind of sit me down and saying, like, there were years and years and years ago when I was all over the place doing all sorts of different things. And she was like, what is it that you actually want? And what's important to you? Make a list of the things. And one of the things that was important, because I was always outside of the traditional music industry and was never going to have the kind of traditional music industry career um, that people have, because I had different priorities and was doing different things. But one thing that was important to me, I wrote down, was respect of one's peers. Um, that was important to me. So that then one has, and your peers, that kind of changes as you go, as you're doing different things. And and now my peers aren't just, like people who do the say just make music or what have you. It's philosophers or thinkers or doctors or fitness people or mindset people or whatever it is. It's a whole group of people because I'm working in a wider terrain. And it's quite the thing to take somebody's voice and turn that into another form. And you could really fuck that up. And people do. I mean, I've heard people sort of sample me and make terrible songs that like, and also with your own voice, it can be difficult for people to listen to their own voice and not feel sort of odd or embarrassed or whatever it is. So to be able to do that in such a fashion that people actually like and have respect for is a wonderful thing, And like, one of the highest compliments or so one of the most gratifying moments of my life in a sort of career way, but also just a personal way, was I wrote to Norm Macdonald and asked him if I could get his permission to use his voice and make some songs. And he wrote back and said that he would be honored. And and he also added that, what did he say? Something along that he would be honored, that it would be an honor, and that I struck him as his favorite kind of person, a free man, is what he said. And like, no award, no chart position, no anything like that could compete with something like that, because Norm Macdonald is someone that I truly, truly admired, and truly, just truly admired. Uh, just with regards to like becoming the optimal version of you, with regards to his talent in this world, there is no higher. He got to the peak of something, and he's somebody who never uh, he never sacrificed any of him to achieve greater success. He got kicked off of the biggest TV show in the USA for refusing to sacrifice a part of himself and stop talking about certain people or telling certain kinds of jokes, right? And he always was that. He was always ultimate true him, regardless of what that cost him. Truly, truly, and it's something I've always done. I had a record deal with the biggest record label in the world, and they wanted me to change some lyrics. and I refused. At one point, Coca-Cola wanted you to use one of my songs in an advert, and I refused because that's what I was. That was my. That was what I believed. I didn't want the song to have that association. So I'd always done that, and someone who I really respected on that level, for that person to recognize something in me was one of the greatest. Sort of, you know, as I said, one of those moments. It was a truly wonderful thing. So to be able to, anyways, so it's a long way of being able to say it, to be able to interact with people on a high level who are people that you respect, and for them to have respect for what you do is one of life's great things. It's one of life's great feelings, experiences. It's a wonderful way to be.
AKIRA, I couldn't have said it better myself.
And that's
That
something
sums
to
up
make it
this.
worth aiming, right? So when we're talking about becoming that version of you that exists in potential,
Yeah,
Michelangelo's David existed in that rock, was always there in potential, and Michelangelo brought that out, and he did
yeah,
that by turning himself into a fine-tuned machine, right? And allowing what you might call God to work through him. Turned himself into this ultimate fucking machine, then allowed God to work through him, right? And if that's the thing that each one of us can do, you can turn yourself into a finely tuned machine. Stevie Wonder would say, God writes his songs.
bro, bro. I literally, AKIRA, was just gonna say, God working through Stevie Wonder, and you've just pulled it
Mhm.
around. You've done the
Hey, there you go.
podcast for me. Come on, mate. Well done.
There
Go on,
you go.
say it. Tell me. Tell me.
Well, that's it, right? Stevie Wonder, you'd say he doesn't write his songs, God writes them through him. But
Yeah,
Stevie Wonder turned himself into a fucking incredible musician,
yeah.
right? He turned himself into a finely tuned machine, then opened himself up enough that forces beyond his full human understanding could work through him. What Alan Moore calls idea space. Some people call them muses. Some people, so on and so forth. Everyone has words for this thing, but it's up to you to turn yourself into the kind of fucking machine that can operate on that level, and that's something that anybody can do. And
Do you feel like you've done that? Do you feel like God works through
I'm on
you?
the
Like
way. I'm on the
when you
way.
get
Yeah, I mean,
these
yeah, I
mindful
understand that that's
things
how
on the
that works.
beach. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I understand how that works. And when I was very early, when I'd just been making music for a few years, like full time, I'd have intonations of that. I used to freestyle a lot, and I'd have moments of incredible clarity where I could feel just something working through me. It felt that way.
yeah.
And moments of making certain songs, there are those moments when you're in the zone. What people call in the zone. When you're in the zone, it feels like a force is flowing through you, and you're accommodating that force. And what you've learned and your skills are allowing you to move your hands or whatever it is where they need to do the things they need to do for this force to express itself. And that's being in the zone. That's why I did that whole, well, you're in the zone sometimes. What if you could always be there? What if you could, what if you could organize your life in such a fashion that you get in the zone and then you do not leave? Because all that takes you out the zone is friction, right? Well, there's various things that could take you out the zone, but that could be described as friction being the kind
Yeah,
of overall thing that
some
pulls you
sort of
out the zone, right? So
distraction
where
or
can you, yeah? So where can you remove friction? Just remove friction wherever it is, and turn yourself into as finely tuned. And I'm very early on that thing. I have so much to learn, so far to go. I'm a very crude machine compared to that which exists in potential. But
yeah,
I'm way further along than I was just a few
yeah.
years ago. I'm way further along than I was just in February because I keep going and I keep learning, and you have to force yourself to exist in that place between chaos and order and constantly be learning something new and refining something practiced and being between these two things where it could all fall apart at any moment. That's where the zone is.
That's that
In the
line, isn't
space
it?
between. It's
Between
in the
chaos
space
and order.
between exactly competence and disaster.
So,
And I really noticed that DJing.
did you? Yeah,
That's where I really noticed that, because I'd see brilliant DJs who had an amazing taste in records and could transition flawlessly, but I saw they weren't creating transcendent experiences because they were just
yeah,
kind of on autopilot, just doing what they could do.
yeah.
You have to add in some chaos, some bit where it's new songs that you don't know if they're going to work or not, some new technique that you don't know if it's going to go down well. It's in that space that true magic occurs, and a transcendent moment for all who witness it is possible. You can't do it in any other way.
You just described. If I could ask you one more question, you just described that that idea that you are not quite yet this perfect machine, but you also referenced that you're far along this journey, further than someone who's just starting out. So would you give any closing advice for any sort of creative, whether that's within music or whether that's in design? The idea behind Life's Fantastic Joke, I want to build this as a platform for creatives in terms of those who are in visual arts and creating designs, but all other things, and speaking to creatives, etc., etc. But if there's someone here listening now, Akira, that's heard what you've just described, what advice would you give them to starting out? How would you tell them, take that chance, drive into chaos, focus on, or not necessarily haul yourself into chaos, but walk that thin line between chaos and order? What advice would you give them if they're just contemplating, is this the thing that I'm supposed to be doing? Is this the thing that makes me sing?
Well, it's never too late to start. And the thing that makes you sing maybe isn't the best way of thinking about it, because you might not know it's the thing that makes your soul sing, or however it was I put it. Sometimes people don't realize what that thing is until quite later, and sometimes the thing isn't even a very pleasant thing that has that effect. So looking for something that's making you happy or something isn't maybe the best way of finding it. The important thing to know is that it's not too late. It's never too late. I remember I had friends who in 2004 liked rapping, but thought it was too late to start rapping because they'd missed
That's
the boat
dead.
on grime. I remember people thinking they'd missed the boat on grime in 2004, right? It had been out for a year or two. You know what I mean? It's so funny. It's never too late. You're early. Whatever it is, you're actually early on it, because all you got to do is zoom out a bit and understand that. Whatever it is, starting a fucking blog, starting a website, you're early. The internet only got invented 20 years ago. Humans have been doing shit for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So whatever it is, you're early, right? So know that you're early, and that's an advantage. And two, whatever you're doing, do it, execute, finish, and then do another thing. Whatever it is. In my instance, it's music, right? So some people will labor over one song or one EP for a year. And from that, all they will get is the lessons learned from making one song or one EP. Whereas if someone who makes a song every day, they'll have 365 lessons, and they will be 365 steps further ahead than the person who labored over the one thing and couldn't let go of it. So you need one thing that's really powerful and helpful is just the discipline of just doing a thing, having a cutoff point, next thing, cutoff point. So finish, do, finish, and finishing. Nothing is ever finished, right? Who was it? Someone said art is never finished, it's abandoned. So you abandon,
Wow.
right? Just go, okay, boom,
Wow.
point, because it will never be finished, and you tomorrow is different to you today. So there's no such thing as perfection. You
Yeah.
tomorrow will be different to you today, so it will have different opinions on the thing you're making. So there's no such thing as perfection. So you just have to keep fucking moving, and every step you take is one step towards your aim. It's one lesson you've learned. That's really powerful. So do that. So just pick a
Amazing,
thing and
man.
do it, and just keep doing it. Very simple.
Incredible. Akira, thank you so much for coming on the Life's Fantastic Joke podcast. It's been a pleasure to meet you, my friend. I really
Likewise,
appreciate
man.
your time, brother.
Likewise. And yeah, thank you for your time. Godspeed on your journey.
Thank you,
You're
dude.
already doing wonderfully. And whatever you wish is there for you to take
Cheers,
as
brother.
well.